So these are such valuable tools that you're mentioning, and I know that when I'm first working with someone, that sometimes in my eagerness to be helpful, if something comes up where the person is very anxious or uncomfortable, I talk too much. I'm not sure what to ask them or what to say to them to kind of calm them down if they're a little agitated, or what do you do? What do you do? What's a good fallback for when you're not sure what to do?
That's a really good question, actually, because I think one of the first things that people need to do to settle themselves down as a coach is to develop a fallback position. The answer is really simple. The answer is that you can ask them factual questions. And in psychology, there's a concept of an object-oriented question. It's a fancy word.
Why do they say that, object-oriented?
Well, it contrasts to ego. And basically what they mean is that it's a question that takes the person outside of themselves. It's an easy question. They know they're not going to be judged for the answer, and they're not going to get lost in introspection or going deeper inside of themselves. And
so they can focus outside, and there's a right answer.
They can focus outside, and there's a right answer.
Got it.
Yeah. So there tend to be things like, what bus did you take to go to that store? What time was it when that happened? What did you have for breakfast today? Where did you get that watch? Things like that.
You might not ask them what they had for breakfast if they came to you for weight control.
Yeah, if it's something that they might... Yes, exactly.
Because that would be a loaded question.
Right.
Or like if they were a shopaholic, you might not ask them where they bought the dress.
Yes. So the basic format is that a factual question, but there are some factual questions that will lead people to think that you will be judging their answer.
Right.
So you want to ask them a question that's very clear that there's nothing to judge.
Right.
And when people come in and they're motivated to talk, sometimes all you need to do is ask them a factual question every 5, 10, 15 minutes, and they'll keep talking through the whole appointment, and that gives you the opportunity to really sit back and study what they're saying. And listen very carefully to what they're saying, so that when you have the opportunity to intervene towards the end, you can say 1 or 2 sentences that are very, very powerful, much more powerful than if you're having to interact the whole time.
What if what they're talking about, they just go on and on and on, they're free associating, and it has nothing to do with they're coming here to get help with adoption? What if they didn't talk at all about adoption?
That's tricky, because I think it's your responsibility as the coach to facilitate their movement towards their goals. And it's your responsibility to do that in spite of them. So on the one hand, you have a responsibility to be moving the conversation towards a productive means. On the other hand, in the model that I work from, what you can understand is that there will be something in what they're motivated to talk about that relates to the themes, the constructive and destructive themes that they presented, that they wanted to accomplish, and what was stopping them. And so I think
maybe if they were talking about, all these, their job and blah, 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 and all these things happening at work, instead of talking about moving towards the adoption thing, they're giving you an indication that they're worried that their work's going to take too much time, they won't have time for the child.
Yes, that could definitely be it.
And so, what would you do at the end? How would you deal with that? Mrs. Jones, this has been such an interesting session, and I've really learned a lot, about what's going on there. I'm wondering, and I'm curious, Glenn, if you think this is an appropriate thing to ask or not, I'm wondering how your feelings about work have to do with the idea of adopting.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely one viable approach. It's definitely one viable approach that frequently works. There's another way to understand it.
Okay.
If you were to interrupt them in the middle of that, if they were really driven to talk about work, and you were to interrupt them in the middle of that and say, well, what does this have to do with adoption? They would probably be insulted.
Well, I'm not saying to do it to interrupt them, but maybe towards the end of it. Tell me what you think.
I think that what you presented could be very valuable.
I see.
You have to make a judgment about, first of all, is this person choosing to talk about work when they told you their most important goal in life was to figure out how to adopt a child? Are they choosing to talk about that because there's something too painful for them about thinking about adopting a child? Because they have lost hope, because they can't convince somebody in their life? You have to ask yourself, why do they want to talk about this rather than talking about adoption directly.
Mm-hmm.
And usually it's because it's too painful.
Mm-hmm.
So then the second thing you have to ask yourself is this person in a space where they would react positively to me directing the conversation back towards adoption? Or do they need to talk on this level, and the way that we'll get productivity out of this session is for me to study how those same constructive and destructive themes are playing out in whatever they're talking about, so that at a later time, when they're talking about adoption again, that I can say, well, this is fairly similar to what happened to John and Judy at work. You really wanted something, and you didn't quite know how to talk to John and Judy at work, just like you don't know how to deal with this question that the adoption agency is asking you. So you can draw that analogy. The fact that they want to talk about John and Judy at work instead of talking about adoption, you could look at that as a wall, and whether or not you bring that to their attention right away, and when you do and how you do, has to do with what you know about them already and what they might respond to.
The reason I'm bringing it up, one thought that I had, is if the topic, the life coaching topic, is specific, like adoption, like anti-aging, like small business development, like the knitting club. If it's something very specific and they don't address it during the session or during whatever it is, I would be worried, and this is just me, that they might leave the session saying, but I didn't do anything about adoption. So feeling that they didn't move towards their goal, they didn't talk about adoption during the session.
I think it's a good point. I think it's a good point that needs to be addressed.
And
there's a variety of ways you can do that. Sometimes it's as simple as saying, the more that you talk about the struggles that you're having in all different areas of your life, and we study together the places that you make progress, the more we're going to be able to apply that to what you really want to accomplish, like adopting a child and
your creative expression, whatever it is.
Yeah. So instead of asking them, what does it have to do with adoption? Because they might not be able to answer and it might be too painful for them. You can tell them how what they did will impact their
moving towards that direction.
In that goal.
And you can compliment them on how well they did, because the reality is when they take that side road, they're showing you all kinds of stuff which will be helpful in the end.
Yeah.
So really, it was very, very helpful, even though they may not perceive it as being on task.
Yes.
So you want to reframe it for them to let them know that they really were on task in talking about that.
I love it.
Okay.
I'm wondering if you have any other ideas, because I think that this is something that you face all the time. You are probably one of the most creative people. Sharon works with groups, and she works with a group of people in front of a one-way mirror, and she's trying to please a group of people behind the one-way mirror.
As well as the people in front of the one-way mirror.
As well as the people in front of the one-way mirror, and she's trying to leave everybody happy in doing it. And so I know that you're usually presented with a goal before the groups, and you've got a discussion guide that outlines what you're supposed to get at, and there are no straight lines in nature.
Right.
And very frequently the best way to get between point A and point B is not as the crow flies, but zigzagging roundabout and exploring. But I know that Sharon, you're running $100,000 projects, and you need to be justifying your value all the time to the client. So I'm wondering if you have other ideas about how you can present to someone that a discussion that seemed to be entirely off task, how you manage to draw that parallel to help them understand that it was on task, or what value it will have towards the task later on.
Basically what we just said, which is, I think if I have a good relationship with the person and they seem like really connected and they seem strong, I might say, it's a very, very interesting story, and we came in talking about adoption and now we're here. And then just pause and let them fill in the gap.
I love it.
Or I might have said, how might what this discussion have been be related to what we're doing here today? That is riskier because you're inviting their, oh my God, I made a mistake. I might do that. I would try to draw the parallel, particularly if I've got a client in the back room and, we're talking about some kind of a medicine, to treat skin condition, and they're off talking about their mother-in-law. And I say, I had this belief that whatever we talk about is related to the subject at hand. We're just talking about eczema, and then we're talking about your mother-in-law. And then pause.
And you pause. I love it.
Pause works. Pause works a lot. Edward R. Murrow is very famous for, no matter what anybody told them, there's research on this, he would end, it didn't matter how deeply they went. They could have shared their guts about every single thing in the whole world. At the very end of the interview, he'd go, and then they would say something really far-reaching they hadn't said before. Isn't that cool?
It's like the research on creativity that says that people come up with the most creative thing after they've exhausted what they think are all the possibilities.
Right.
If you ask people to come up with as many creative things to do with a paperclip as possible, and they give you 20 of them and then they're out, and you say, okay, give me 20 more. They might not be able to give you 20 more, but the 2 or 3 that they come up with are probably going to be more creative than the first 20 that they thought of.
Right.
I love that. That was really good. So object-oriented questions or simple factual questions are things that you can fall back on. Mistake number 8 is life coaches that give up too soon.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's kind of like learning a language, like learning a way of being, and after a while, after you've worked with a few dozen people, you get it. There's a point where, just like when you're learning a language, that the syntax starts to make sense, and you've got enough vocabulary that you're comfortable communicating. You might not feel fluent, but you get it, you can hold your own. And until that point, it can be very overwhelming any time someone wants to have a conversation with you. It's very much the same way with getting to life coach.
The way that I understand that is when you're learning any new kind of thing, even though you thought you're going to really love doing it, it's hard. It's hard. You're exercising new muscles. I'm thinking about, knitting. I've been talking about knitting throughout this whole thing. I started knitting just a few months ago, and they said, I might have already said this, if I did, forgive me. This one book I read said, it's going to feel like flossing your teeth with your toes. And that's how it feels holding knitting needles at the very beginning. It's really awkward. You don't know where to put the needle and how to draw the yarn through. And oh my God. And you see now I'm like a speed demon, right? And it's only a few months. I think it's the same thing with any new skill. I've seen this in people that I know and friends and stuff and people that I've counseled. They give up before they've had a chance to build their muscles. Whether it's a mental muscle or a physical muscle,
and it does feel like flossing your teeth with your toes. It does.
It's so awkward.
And particularly as a new coach, because our expectations are that we're good interpersonally, we know how to relate to people.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah. And so all of a sudden, if you're in this situation where you feel awkward,
and they're not falling in love with you immediately.
Yeah. But you'll get it. The most important thing is to do as many appointments as possible early on, and you'll get it.
So you want to practice by having lots of people so that you can see them. You want to get your mistakes out. You have to make your mistakes in order to, you have to drop a stitch and unwind the piece and start all over again sometimes.
Right.
So.
And the other thing, because this is connected to the stepladder marketing system, is that the efficacy of the stepladder marketing system builds over time. What I mean by that is, remember, we're building this irresistible newsletter, and then we're getting at least a few hundred people to sign up for it every month. And then from that newsletter, we're trying to drive people to teleseminars, to have contact with other people who are experiencing the same thing, and talk about some of the solutions you can provide and demonstrate them. And in the beginning, let's say the first month you've got 200 people on the list, and you send out a note about a teleseminar, you're probably going to have 1 or 2 people on that teleseminar. If you do really well, you might have 5.
Wow.
Yeah. So you're not going to have a lot of people to start with. And from those 1 or 2 people, maybe you're going to get an appointment for a consultation, or maybe not. By the end of the year, when you've got 2,000, 4,000, 5,000 people on that list, then you're going to have 10, 12, 15, 20 people in, and it just grows from there. And I'm using very low numbers because it's actually possible to add 1,000 people a month to your newsletter. The point is, though, that the volume that's going through your pipeline builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. So even if you're burning through the first dozen people that come through, and it's taking you a while to get them, it feels painful because it took so long to get the first appointment.
Right.
Even if that's happening, the marketing system empowers you such that you'll have enough flow that you'll get it. And when I was a kid, I played in the rock and roll band. Used to have really long hair and a Bob Dylan type beard. And
you were so cute.
Thanks. We played in the band. We made the mistake of our first concert we gave at the town library. Everybody in the school came, and we sucked.
Oh, no.
We were really, really bad.
Oh, no.
So after that, we always decided that if you play in a band, you should open out of town. And in a way, it's a kind of a good thing that it takes a little while for your marketing list to build, because you're going to be so much better by your 6th teleseminar, by the 12th or 15th session that you do. You don't want to have 20 people on the line the first time that you do it.
Right.
So it's a little better because of that. I also think that life coaching is a place where people talk about the phrase "success is a journey," and it almost sounds like a hippie 1960-ish thing to say, but the truth is that if you're too focused on the numbers, if you're too focused on the finances, if you're too focused on how many sessions you're doing, if you're too focused on exactly what people are accomplishing in your practice, then you're going to find that scheduling lots of appointments is a great way to make your life pass you by quickly, and you don't really enjoy the journey as much. And the journey of becoming a life coach, I found more personally fulfilling and gratifying than the actual growth, which was tremendous, that I saw in my clients. But the fact that I had all these stories inside of me, and the fact that when you sit with people who reveal to you the intricacies of their most intimate thoughts and how they problem solve, and the way that empowers you in your own life, is more valuable than anything else that you do in life coaching, in my opinion. And so I think that people really need to enjoy that part of the journey.
Because you learn so much about yourself by helping these other people to see what their struggles are, and at first think, well, I don't have that struggle, and then you think, well, maybe I do.
Yes, that's true. You come up against struggles that you didn't know that you had. What's also true is that because your day-to-day experience, because day-to-day people don't really share with you their most intimate problem-solving thoughts and concerns and deepest feelings, you're usually alone with your most intimate problem-solving thoughts and deepest concerns and feelings. And when you're alone with them and you don't have the opportunity to observe others, you tend to think that what you experience is what everybody else experiences.
Right.
And it's freeing to see that that's not necessarily the case, that there's a whole range of ways that people think and feel and do and problem solve. And it expands you. It makes you a better person.
It's cool, right?
It really is.
I like that too.
It really is.
And with that, what about having your own coach?
I think that almost goes without saying, because in order to successfully convey value as a life coach, you have to believe that there is value in life coaching. And how can you authentically convey value? How can you authentically convey that message if you haven't experienced it?
I think that's so important. I think that might be something that people say, but I don't need a coach.
Well, you don't need a coach. Remember, that's one of the critical differences between coaching and psychotherapy is psychotherapy might be something that you need. Psychotherapy might be something that you need to heal a psychological problem, so to speak. Coaching is something that you do because you want to accomplish more in your life. So the answer to that is that you don't need a coach. If you want to accomplish having a very successful coaching practice, then you probably...
Might be a good idea to be coached by a successful coach.
It would be a good idea, especially to be coached by a successful coach, and in particular one who has experienced coaching other coaches.
Right. Like train the trainer.
Yeah. And I recommend that people have the experience of calling several coaches and understanding how they do the introductory sessions and how they handle the initial appointments and what they have to offer. And
what are the signs of a good coach when you're looking for one for yourself?
I think the signs of a good coach is got a structured approach, and they can articulate it. There are coaches that work entirely intuitively that make a tremendous impact, but it's harder to learn from them. It's harder to learn how to be a coach from someone who does it entirely intuitively and because they won't know how to teach it. And there is more danger of someone being bad or impulsive or emotional as a coach if they haven't articulated their philosophy of coaching and they don't have a paradigm from which they're working. There's a lot more danger of them being driven by, not maliciously, out of a very benign wish, but they can often be confused between what they really want and what you really need. So I tend to shy away from coaches that work entirely intuitively or won't articulate, haven't taken the time to articulate a particular model that they like to work with. There's another important experience of getting coached that is very valuable for you to have, which is to try to be the best coaching client that you can be. And this is
interesting.
I think this is an unusual philosophy, but it's something that's really worked for me as a coaching client, which is that having been a coach and a therapist and been around coaches and therapists all my life, I know what ails coaches and therapists. I know what their struggles are. And I know when I was at my best. And I would be at my best when people would be interested and cooperative and attentive and would be complimentary in some way. And it's a little embarrassing to admit that, but I'm a person like anybody else, and I respond to people who respond to me. So what I do with my coaches is, which is not really what I've done when I've been in therapy, but what I do with my coaches is I tune myself in finally to their personality. And I figure out what motivates them, what inspires them to work hard for me. And I try to give them the feelings and behaviors that I need to perform as a coaching client to inspire them to work as hard as they possibly can for me. Because if I can be one of their most coachable, best clients, if I can be the person they look forward to seeing every week, because no matter what coaches say, there are clients that I look forward to seeing more so than others, then they're going to work extra hard to make sure I get everything out of it. And I choose coaches that I'm able to tune into like that I want to connect to, that I genuinely...
That you want to emulate.
That I want to emulate and who I genuinely attach to, so that I'm capable of doing this authentically. And some people would say, well, you don't want your coaching clients to be performing for you, you want them to be doing what's in their best interest. That's true. But
it is in your best interest.
It is in your best interest to figure out what makes your coach tick and help them to work as hard as they can for you.
That you can learn their techniques and you can also become really good at what you're being coached in.
Yes.
The more they have to give you and the more they can do it well, the better chance you have of learning it. I think that's cool. So what that reminds me of as you're talking is how much talking, how much listening?
Well, that's something that often confuses people. And the basic idea here is that people have a talk-to-listen ratio that they're comfortable with. If you looked at in any given dyadic conversation, a conversation between two people, and you kind of charted out the percentage of time that one person talked versus the other, some people are more comfortable talking, and some people are more comfortable listening.
Right.
And that goes all the way on the continuum from some people who would be comfortable 50-50. And some people would be comfortable if they talk 1% of the time, you talk 99% of the time. And some people who prefer you basically didn't talk at all. And you need to understand where your client's level of comfort is on that continuum. In order to facilitate growth, they'll get more growth when they talk than when you talk. So generally, your job will be to try to get them to talk as much as possible. The exception to that is the person who doesn't even seem to understand that you're there and is so wrapped up in themselves that they're almost annoyed if you say anything at all during the session. And the reason that that's an exception and you want to start to push that back a little bit, not right away, the reason that's an exception is that they'll be doing that with other people in their lives, and I guarantee you that
it's hurting them.
Yeah, if they don't recognize the presence of other people, that's one of the major reasons they're not able to accomplish what they want to accomplish.
Right.
So, generally speaking, I try to get people to talk as much as possible with respect for their comfort level. So what that could mean, if I have a person who's a major listener and is very, very uncomfortable talking, it could mean that I do most of the talking for the sessions for the first 6 months. It really could mean that. Usually, if you have someone who just can't talk and you talk and talk and talk and talk, and you don't put any pressure on them to talk, eventually they'll get hungry to talk.
That's interesting.
Oh, they will. They will, yeah. Because they kind of know they're not going to get as much out of it if they don't talk. I once remember a couple that came to see me, and I asked them what they wanted to talk about today, and they said money, and they didn't say anything. And I said, well, what did you want to talk about with money? And they both kind of looked at each other, and I could tell they were completely and totally overwhelmed about money, and they were afraid to fight about it, and I just launched into a spiel. And I told them about the different ways that people relate to money, and some people it was security, some people it was freedom, some people it was control, and talked about the different troubles people got into with money. And I just talked and talked and talked and talked and talked, and eventually they started laughing and they said, "I didn't think you would do that." I don't think you can go to see someone and they would just talk and talk and talk and talk about something you didn't want to talk about. And that was my cue to shut up. And then they told me it was on their mind.
That's funny.
Yeah. So, to be able to do that, you need to be reading books that you like about a variety of life topics. And the more people that you see, the more stories you're going to have inside of you that will make it possible for you to deal with the people who don't talk. For me personally, that was harder because even though I've been very talkative for this whole module,
you're really a listener.
I'm really a listener. And so the people that I would work best with are people who are more talkers. It was very uncomfortable for me when the people would be coming in and not able to talk. But I developed it as a skill, as a muscle.
It's interesting because I'm more of a talker ordinarily. Like we flipped in this interview, but I'm usually more of a talker than a listener.
Yes.
But still, when I'm working with people, I prefer talkers. So you prefer talkers and I prefer talkers, even though I'm a talker and you're a listener. Talkers are easier.
For your job, because your job is to get information from them.
Right. Even seeing, coaching clients, I prefer if they talk.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me why.
Well, because that's when I'm doing my job.
Yeah, okay.
Now, if I'm presenting the results of the study to my client, my job is to talk. But if I'm helping someone to tell me about their whatever, whether it's their behavior in a certain way, their feelings about something, when I'm doing corporate interviewing, or whether I'm helping someone to tell me about what they want to work on, I still feel like my job is to listen, and that's what I do. And I feel like I'm not doing my job well if the other person's not talking.
Sure.
I'm still thinking about the example I gave before about the person who comes in and the thing they say they want to talk about is adoption, but they don't. Mm-hmm. The other thing that could happen, I think, is that in wanting to do my job really well as a coach, I might want to push them to make more progress than they're ready to make.
Right.
And I was wondering what you thought about that.
I think that happens all the time. And I think it happens all the time, especially in the beginning, because, if you haven't yet had the experience of seeing someone talk about seemingly tangential or unrelated topics, and then have an insight which moves them forward, which relates to everything they've been talking about for the last few months, if you haven't had that experience and perspective, then you feel anxious that you're not doing the job.
Right.
But the truth is, if people are coming on time, if they're calling on time and they're talking and they're paying you on time and they're basically cooperating with you, they almost can't help but make progress towards their goals. They almost can't help it because language is the food of the intellect. And our intellects exist for the purpose of solving problems and moving towards goals. Mm-hmm. And so the more that they have this opportunity to put their thoughts and feelings into language, you have to assume that they haven't stopped wanting what they want. So it's got to be driving part of what they're saying, even if the relationship is not immediately apparent. So if you can keep them talking, and you can be studying and grasping for analogies and patterns and trying to put it together, then even if you don't see it or you can't say it, they'll get there. If they stop paying on time, if they stop calling on time, if they're missing too many sessions, if they're rescheduling too many sessions, then there's something that they're not talking about that they need to talk about, and you need to figure out how to address that.
So what would you do if they were missing sessions?
I would look for an opportunity to ask them if they were aware that they were missing about, let's say they missed three out of the last 10 sessions, that they were missing about 30% of the work. Did they know that? Mm-hmm. And let them talk. Usually it's enough to just bring it to people's awareness and bring the topic into the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You usually don't have to make a point.
What if they say, oh, I've been so busy?
Well, that would be great. That would be great if they said that. Because what they're telling you is what they tell themselves that moves them away from their goals. So you want to explore that more. What have you been busy with? I really want to know.
Oh, my boss made me do this and that and the other thing, and so I couldn't make and then I had to go, and my husband wanted me to, and then I had to.
Well, you said a bunch of things there. What's going on with your boss?
Well, I've agreed to do 2 jobs.
Really?
But he doesn't realize it.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, they fired this one person, now I have all of her responsibilities, I'm doing 2 jobs.
How did he get you to do that?
Basically said someone's got to do it, and looked at me. And I said, okay.
Interesting. That happens to you a lot, right?
Yeah, I take on more than I can handle lots of times.
Yeah, I understand. Well, we'll do the best we can.
Yeah, thanks.
So you see, what I did there was this hypothetical person, at their level of experience, feels that they're too busy to work on accomplishing their goals.
Mm-hmm.
And I explored what's making them too busy.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out that it's because they're acquiescing to the boss's demands, and I was able to say that, because you're actually playing a role, Sherry, my darling honey, and I've got a close relationship with you, I was able to say, that happens to you a lot, doesn't it? Now, I might not have said that with someone early on in their work with me.
Oh, really?
I might not have, because it's drawing attention to a pattern in their personality, and they may not be ready to look at that. But then I said, how did he get you to do that?
Mm-hmm.
How did he get you to do that? Right. Taking the blame off of her, it's kind of like anesthesia, so that you can explore the destructive part of the personality without as much pain.
That's a really cool way of talking. When I was saying about having them look at something in their history by observing it, that's a great way of describing it. That's another form of anesthesia. That's cool. I really like that.
People don't have to talk about things directly to have growth. And very frequently it's easier when they don't talk about it directly.
That makes perfect sense.
Right. And what's painful for people, this is also controversial, what's painful for people is taking responsibility and observing their patterns and making a commitment to change and dealing with that anxiety. And so my approach is generally to support their defenses while we're gathering information. Mm-hmm. And as they have that experience, I become a safer person to be with than anybody else in the world.
Got it.
And because that's true, we're going to learn more about
what's getting in the way,
and that will prepare them to get to the goal of taking responsibility and moving forward where they need to move forward.
I love it. It's great.
And at the end of that little conversation we had, I said, well, we'll do the best we can.
Took the pressure off me.
Took the pressure off her, yeah. Says that I don't expect you to resolve this difficulty right away, and we're just going to study it. Exactly. Okay.
I thought that was super.
Okay.
Now, that really leads into the last piece, I think, that we have here,
mm-hmm.
which is when you notice something and you have an aha, let me talk for myself. When I notice something and I have an aha, oh my God, I have to sometimes really keep myself from interpreting like, oh my God, I see that. You really hate your father, or, whatever. And they might not be ready to hear that, and it might actually get in the way.
Right, so in that last example, I might have said to this hypothetical coaching client, well, that's something that's really interfering with you moving forward on the adoption, because you tend to acquiesce when people give you additional work to do. And you did that with your father, and you told me you did that with your best friend, and you did that with your husband, and that's what's preventing you from taking the time to do the research and make the trip to Russia and do what you need to do to make the adoption.
Baby. Yeah, that could have blown me away.
And that could have blown you away, right.
Like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? I'm here because I want to do that.
Right. So I think this last mistake is this notion that early coaches and early therapists have, that their job is to hold up a mirror to their client. And if you were to hold up a mirror like that, it can be very painful to look in the mirror.
Well, that's such an interesting thing. Like someone who's been through a difficult situation, like if they've been through something difficult physically, and during the healing process you turn black and blue, you're swollen, you're red, and you're really healing, or you're itchy. Mm-hmm. But if you show the mirror at that point during the healing,
right.
Ew.
Right.
Ugh.
Right.
It can be really disgusting.
It's like there's a scene in it, As Good as It Gets, where Greg Kinnear had been injured, and Jack Nicholson, and I forgot the name of the actress who plays...
Helen Hunt, I think.
It wasn't Helen Hunt, it was the other comedic, shorter woman. Anyway, there's a scene where he's recovering from a horrible car accident, and he says, well, how bad do I look? And they're kind of like trying to smile, but they're obviously like gritting their teeth.
Right.
And he says, show me, and he holds up the mirror, and the guy just screams.
Right.
Screams and look away.
Right.
He would have been better off not seeing that.
Right. He didn't need to see himself.
Yeah, he didn't need to see that in order to heal at that moment.
Right.
There are times when people do.
I mean, that's why sometimes you say bandaged.
Mm-hmm. It makes me think about how I was mistaken when I first became a psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
When I first became a psychologist, I was 25 years old when I defended my dissertation. And, I was actually seeing patients before that in graduate school and, doing treatment of my friends in high school, which I shouldn't have been doing, but I was.
And well?
I was okay. I always joke with everybody that when I turned 16, everybody else wanted a car. I wanted to go see a therapist, which was really because, to me, therapy had always been presented as a growth model and not as a medical model.
Right.
And what they were really doing, which they didn't know, was life coaching.
Exactly.
They were really presenting life coaching, but we just didn't have those words back then. Anyway, when I first got people into the room and I got my license and I started working formally, I really thought it was going to be about figuring out the patterns and pointing them out to people like a puzzle, and then they would see how the puzzle fit together, and they would jump up and down and say, yes, you got it, doc, now I'm going to go do it, I'm cured, thanks. And it's not about that. In fact, after you've been doing it for a while, and I think after I saw my 1000th patient, I could probably size something up in a session or two and understand what the major difficulties were, and if it worked like that and I could point things out to people, I would never need to see people for more than a session or two because I would just explain it to them and they would walk away and do it.
Right.
But it's not about that. It's more about getting people to love you enough that they're willing to change. I use the word love on purpose, actually.
Tell me.
And, this is all over the telephone, and I maintain boundaries with clients, and there are a lot less strict rules for boundaries with coaching clients than there are with psychotherapy clients, but I still think it's a more powerful relationship when you don't necessarily socialize outside of the coaching relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But I use love on purpose because trust means, well, you're not going to tell anybody else, you're not going to humiliate me, you're not going to use this information to hurt me, consciously to hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
Love means that you become an important enough person in my life that I'm willing to repeatedly risk changing my behavior and my habitual way of thinking in order to accomplish what you've taught me I really can accomplish. At the deepest level, it means being willing to... In Star Wars, there's this scene where Luke Skywalker has to go into a cave to face the dark side of the Force.
Right.
And I think we all have that cave. Jung called it the shadow. Sullivan called it the not me. There's part of us that is so frightening to us, even the healthiest person, that they're used to pushing it away. And that's usually part of what's preventing them from accomplishing what they want to accomplish in their lives. So who are they going to go into the cave with? It's not just someone they trust, it's someone that they love.
Got it.
And that won't happen until you've been there for them consistently and lovingly for usually many years.
So when you
see progress all along the way. But
when you start a life coaching practice, you could be starting a practice where you have the same people working with you for years.
You really can, which is one of the reasons that I think it's important to set up a trial period with everybody to start with.
Make sure it's someone you want to do that with.
Yeah, because after someone's working with you for many years, it's not necessarily ethical to let them go. 5, 6, 7 years, someone's working with you that long, and they're making consistent progress in your life. I think once you work with them for 5, 6, 7 years, you really owe it to them to be available to them almost indefinitely. I think in the first couple of months, I don't commit beyond the consultation. Mm-hmm. And this is why, by the way, I'll charge for a session rather than charging for the month during the trial period. Once I've had a couple of consultations and I think that I might like to try helping someone, I'll set up a 3 or 4 month trial period. And during that time, they can pay me by the month. And life coaches tend to like to be paid by the month because it puts more of a value on the month as a whole rather than session to session. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes, just for the very reason you were talking about, it's not clear to the client that the conversation was actually on task. But as a month, they can look back and see what they accomplish more easily.
What if after 3 or 4 months you don't want to work with that person? How do you get rid of them?
Well, it's usually obvious to them that it's not working as well as it's obvious to you. So it's not usually so much of a problem after 3 or 4 months if you've done this. And during the 3 or 4 months, I don't set up a regular time. I juggle their time a little bit. So I tell them I'm working at a regular time to figure out what's going to be best for them and for me, which is true, because I don't believe it's in their best interest to have a regular time until I'm totally sure that, I'm going to be a stellar influence in their life. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, if I really can't help them, they won't have made it through 3 months. It will have become clear and they'll stop coming, they'll stop calling. If they've been calling regularly, cooperating and paying and making some progress and I still don't want to work with them, then I might ask them how they think it's going. And I would think through very specifically why I didn't want to work with them. And I think through very specifically who would be better matched to their pursuit. And I would say that it's not clear to me yet. I want to think about it, and I'd like you to think about it also. But it doesn't seem to me that the goals that you have are necessarily what I specialize in. I don't feel that I am adequately serving you. I don't feel that I'm helping you to accomplish what you want to accomplish. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to.
And that would be true.
Yeah, and if you really like to set up another trial period, for another month or two to see if that works, then I'd be happy to do that. And of course, if you didn't want to do that, I'd also would be happy to take your call. You want to talk something over once in a while, that's fine. I have a session here or there, I can do that. But when I look back over the couple of months, then I don't think I can help you. I don't think I'm qualified to do this. And you make it entirely about you, so they don't attack themselves.
Right. What if it's someone who has really bad stuff and they really know that they're disgusting? I don't know. What if someone has been rejected by everybody in the whole world and they come to you and...
Well, it could feasibly present an opportunity for them to fight for it. At that point, they might become mobilized. I remember a woman that came in, and I did not want to work with her. From the moment she came in, she was scowling, and she had a baby with her. She was good with the baby, but she was scowling, and she was negative, many 100 pounds overweight, and felt no hope of ever getting any better, and told me that I was not going to be able to help her.
Why was she there?
She was there because she wanted to get a job. She wanted to lose weight. And she wanted to have a boyfriend. She wanted to fix her life. This was definitely a psychotherapy patient. And she just went on the attack as soon as she came in, and she told me that I wasn't thin enough. I wasn't thin enough. My office wasn't neat enough. And
oh my goodness.
Now, I wasn't experienced enough when she came in. At this point, I probably could have worked with that very well. But at that point, I really didn't know what to do, and it was very uncomfortable for me, and I didn't want to work with her. People think that, they say you attract more flies with honey than you do with vinegar, but I don't find that to be true. I find that the more negative I am, the more people pay attention to me. Huh. And I thought, oh my God, what am I in for?
Oh my goodness.
What I should have done was, I should have said, good! That's a really good attitude. I think that's really good. Kind of throw her for a loop and let her start attacking me more, and I should have, kind of jarred with her. But it's not my personality. It's not really my personality to do that. And what I did that was a mistake that got her overly bonded to me.
Oh, no.
She was saying, there's nothing in my life that's any good. I don't know why I don't just kill myself. And I said, well, I'll tell you one thing you do good. And I said, you're a really good mother. Because she was standing there rocking this baby, and this horribly negative, miserable person was making this baby feel soothed and happy and comforted, and the baby would be smiling at her. And I said, it only takes me 30 seconds, so you're a very good mother, aren't you? And she said, yeah, I am. And
wow.
But I really didn't want to work with her. And she pursued me, and I worked with her for a few sessions, and I told her that I didn't specialize, but at that juncture, I had been too nice to her. That went to her heart and soul. That was a mistake that I made.
She fell in love with you right then.
She fell in love with me right then,
yeah.
And she was devastated that I didn't want to work with her. And so, you have to be careful about that up front, though. If you might not want to work with someone, you have to be careful about saying something nice to them or something that's going to make a very big difference to them.
Because then they're going to want to be with you.
Yeah, you're not going to have that option, and you're going to be in that conflict that I was in. And at that time, she had been referred by someone, and she called me a complaint, and it was very I was very young, and those are the kind of things that happen when you're young and inexperienced.
So I think that the lesson that we had here is, first of all, I think that was incredibly loving of you. You really, and it's part of the reason why I fell in love with you myself, because you're a really sweet, sweet person, and you really try to see the good in people and help them. But I think also that what we're saying here is that we are going to make lots of mistakes in the beginning. And we're going to learn from them, and we'll get better and better and better. It's like that's a mistake you wouldn't make now.
Right.
That's so cool.
And that's why as a life coach in particular, it's important to connect with a therapist or two or three that can handle the people that come in that you really can't handle, that you're worried about. And
so you have some resources.
Yeah. And the line generally is I don't specialize in this. I really don't have enough experience. I tried to help someone with this once before, and I failed, and I don't want to experiment on you. That kind of thing.
It's respectful.
Yeah. It's hard. Oh, there was one more thing I wanted to say about the analogy of beginning coaches thinking that it's their job to hold up a mirror to the client.
Uh-huh.
The point at which it became clear to me that wasn't my job was when I had a client come in who said that, I asked him why he came, and he said it was because he couldn't look in the mirror anymore.
Aww.
And he wanted to be able to.
Aww.
And that's when I realized that my job is to make it possible for people to look in the mirror. My job is not to force the mirror in front of their face.
Right.
Make it possible. That's my job. Make it possible. Figure out why they can't. Make it possible.
That's very sweet.
Those are the 12 most commonly made life coaching mistakes that I see. Let me just repeat the mistakes again. Mistake number 1 was not knowing how to leverage their voicemail or their answering machine. And there was a sample message, and it talked about needing to be compassionate and make sure that you want to hear from them and that no one else will hear the message, and let them know when you're going to call them back, and that they can talk as long as they want to, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And then we also talked about managing your calls and when you call back. Mistake number 2 was misunderstanding the difference between being a minute late and a minute early, and the difference was in who waits for who. Uh-huh. And when you cross that threshold, it's a night and day difference on the experience of the client. Next one was not taking any notes, and we talked about how to take some progress notes and the fact that you can have a personal journal that's separate from your regular journal.
Mm-hmm. And a personal journal is something that is confidential for yourself.
Yeah, personal diary.
Mm-hmm.
Mistake number 4 is being too eager, too available, committing too soon, which means that you avoid setting up regular appointments too quickly, you avoid setting up a monthly retainer too quickly, you avoid seeing them too frequently too quickly. Even if they have money and they're ready to go, it's kind of like someone saying, but I want to sleep with you already. It's on the first date, and you need to get to know them first.
Okay.
Mistake number 6, which is really mistake number 5, is not picking a coaching structure. Not having some type of a paradigm from which to view what's happening so that you can orient yourself when you're lost. And we talked about my goal orientation paradigm, which is not really mine. It's something that I learned from my coaches and my mentors. Mm-hmm. Mistake number 7 is not having a fallback position. We have to admit as life coaches that we're going to be confused and bedazzled a great deal of the time early on. And by creating a fallback position, which you know you can always rely upon,
like factual-based questions.
Factually based questions, something that takes the person outside of themselves, which will not lead them to feel that they could be judged. Mistake number 8 is giving up too soon. Mm-hmm. That you need to recognize that a lot of times people come in once, get what they want, and never come back, or wait several years to come back again. That you have to get a lot of stories inside of you to be successful as a coach, so that you can recognize patterns and see paradigms, and also so that for the people who are not comfortable talking, you can say, well, I know a guy who is struggling with this, and
blah, blah, blah.
Blah, 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 blah. And of course you have to guard everybody's confidentiality when you do that.
Right. His name was John Smith.
The key point in guarding confidentiality, by the way, is that you can't reveal anything that would allow people to identify that person. You can talk about issues and topics, but you should change enough of the details that it would be impossible for anybody to identify that person. That's not a law in coaching because coaching is not regulated yet, but if the coaching industry follows the psychotherapy industry, it will be something like that. There's a tipping point once you've got those stories inside of you and you've kind of learned the language and the syntax and the vocabulary. All of a sudden it becomes a whole lot easier. And the other thing to consider in those initial stages is not to take on too many new people at once. Because if you had 20 hours of coaching in a week, but 10 of them were new, you would be exhausted and overwhelmed.
Right.
If you had 20 hours of coaching of all people that you've been seeing for 6 months, it would be a piece of cake. Well, not a piece of cake, but it would be much easier. Yeah. And I was in a situation as a psychologist. You do an internship, and all of a sudden they flood you with all these people, and I was having the weirdest dreams at night, and I just didn't have enough processing time. There's just not enough time to do that, and you need to leave yourself that processing time.
Makes sense.
Mistake number 9 is not having your own coach. If you want to authentically convey value and learn to charge high fees, then you need to have enough experience so that you believe in the value of coaching when your client questions it.
Right.
And if you haven't had that experience, then when your client questions it, you're going to question it also.
That makes perfect sense.
Mistake number 10 is not understanding your client's talk-to-listen ratio. Some people are more comfortable talking, some people are more comfortable listening. The more you can get them to talk, the more progress they're going to make. But you can only do that in the context of their comfort level. And the people that are less comfortable talking, you have to pick up the ball and run with the other side. Mistake number 11 is being more interested in clients' progress than they are. That's particularly something that people are vulnerable to early on because they're not familiar with how things that seem seemingly disjointed and unrelated result in progress later on. So they tend to jump at that. But mistake number 12 is your job is not to force a mirror into the client's face. Your job is to make it possible for them to see the things that will facilitate their goals. Those are the 12 most important mistakes that I came up with when I reviewed the notes that I took, the coaches that I've been supervising, and I thought about the family members that come to my coaching. And that's what I wanted to go over today.
This is wonderful. Very, very helpful. Thank you so much.
In just 12 weeks, you can become a certified professional coach, confident in your ability, and fully equipped to grow a thriving practice from anywhere or your money back. My name is Dr. Glenn Livingston. And I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about taking your coaching dreams a lot more seriously, about getting the right certification and training, and about developing the confidence to deliver stellar results time after time so your clients will accomplish their goals, others will notice, and get referred back to you. I'll hope you forgive my modesty while we talk, because my wife and I have more combined experience in both coaching and business development than virtually any other program on the market. I've personally worked with over 1,000 clients and supervised dozens of coaches and therapists, sharing them literally thousands of groups and team-building workshops. And together we've sold more than $20 million in consulting. We've had our previous work, research, and theories covered in major media like the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Sun-Times, ABC and CBS Radio, the Wall Street Journal, New York Daily News, and many more. So we have the confidence in our ability to train and certify you as a coach and give you the know-how to build the practice of your dreams. In fact, we're so confident, we're willing to guarantee it right through the end of the very last class. If you don't feel our training was your best choice for any reason, just show us you attended at least 3/4 of the classes and did at least 75% of the assignments. We will refund every penny that you paid. When you compare our experience, guarantee, and more affordable than most pricing, we think your choice will be clear. But if you're like most coaches, you're probably a little skeptical, maybe a lot. You see a lot of limitations and obstacles, and I'd like to talk about them with you because most of them are self-imposed. For example, you might think it's not really possible to earn a living as a professional coach. Maybe you think there's too much competition. But did you know that as of this recording, there were only about 20,000 active coaches in North America? That's less than one coach for every 15,000 people. Of course, not every one of those 15,000 people is in the market for a coach, but coaching has become ever more acceptable and interesting thanks to reality shows like The Biggest Loser, The Voice, dancing shows, singing shows, et cetera, et cetera. Every one of the contestants gets a coach, and the audience gets to see the value firsthand as they progress. More importantly, most coaches ignore the immense value of niching. There's literally hundreds of coaching niches to choose from, and when you do niche, you dramatically lower your competition and raise your odds of success. For example, where there may be 20,000 active coaches overall in North America, how many adoption coaches do you think there are? What about coaches who specialize in chocolate addiction? By the way, I could use one of those. Family business, academic achievement, and you don't have to marry any of these niches either. You just try one on to size, learn the skills, and transfer them to whatever suits your fancy later on. But here's another self-imposed limitation. Many people think it's simply not possible to earn a living as a coach. Well, you can visit becomearealcoach.com to see detailed studies which suggest the average active coach earns about $55,000 per year. Of course, there are coaches who make a lot more and coaches who make a lot less. And it would be unreasonable to assume just getting certified will automatically give you this income. Your income as a coach will depend upon many things, including the niche you choose. For example, working with affluent couples to help them adopt is likely to be more lucrative than helping disabled veterans adjust to life at home. Not any more meaningful, fulfilling, or soulful, but definitely more profitable. The environment you work in will also influence your income. Private practice versus a salaried employee, etc. The number of hours you choose to fill. Nobody says you have to work full time. The fees that you're comfortable charging. There's a lot of coaches out there that don't want to charge as much as they really could charge. The business model that you choose. In other words, individual coaching versus selling books, tapes, seminars, groups, and events for more leverage and passive income. The seriousness of the problem that you specialize in. How desperate are your clients to solve it? How meaningful and valuable is the solution? For example, it's easier to earn more as an adoption coach than a yoga coach for this very reason. And your income also depends upon how much effort you put into attracting clients. But most importantly, in our experience, your income is related to your coaching confidence and ability to produce stellar results for your clients. Or maybe the obstacle stopping you from taking your coaching dreams to the next level is wondering whether you need a professional background in therapy or counseling. But you don't, because coaching isn't therapy. So you won't get involved in diagnosing, treating, or curing any type of mental illness. And we'll teach you how to clearly draw the line and skillfully refer clients who require a licensed professional. When in doubt, refer it out is our motto. Coincidentally, many of these professionals who you refer to can become a good resource of referrals back into your network. Maybe you're not sure if you're worthy of coaching. Maybe you think you don't have enough experience, or you're just not credible enough to coach people professionally, or that you don't have the expertise. When people tell me this, I tell them that they're asking the wrong question. See, if you're willing to put your heart and soul into helping someone, if you're willing to give them your undivided attention on a regular or semi-regular basis until they reach their goal, if you're willing to make them a priority in your life in exchange for a reasonable payment, then the real question is, you should be asking, are these clients worthy of me? Because you see, you've only got a limited amount of time, energy, and love to give these people, so you've got to protect your practice. The real question is, are they worthy of you? Maybe you don't think you have the time to become a certified professional coach, but if you can make 4 or 5 hours a week, which is under an hour a day, for just a few months, you can definitely become a certified professional coach in our program. And there are many, many ways to start a coaching practice on a part-time schedule. We know most coaches have very busy lives even before they begin. And because we actually like coaches who are out there living real lives, we work hard to accommodate them. Coaching is more about experience and the desire to share and spare than it is about book knowledge. Maybe you think you can't afford it. But our program is much more affordable than most other live interactive certification programs, and we've got financing options to suit any budget. Besides, coaching is one of the least expensive businesses to start because you can work with people all over the world via telephone, Skype, and the internet. So there's really no need for office space, rent, or other overhead. And we'll show you how to make a safe transition plan so you can carefully plan your move from another job with a great deal of confidence when the time is right. Because you are the product. This is another reason why coaching is easier to get into and less expensive, because you are the product. Many of the traditional costs associated with starting a business, like inventory or research and development, production cost, they just simply disappear. So, at the risk of appearing self-serving, a better question than, can you really afford to do this, is, can you really afford not to do it? Finally, perhaps you think you're going to be a great coach, but you're too allergic to marketing to do anything about it. And if you feel this way, it's likely because you've been taught the wrong things about marketing. You're probably thinking of used car salesmen, cold calling, constant rejection, and constant lies. And nobody's taken the time to find out what marketing methods really suit your personality. Remember, Sharon and I have more combined experience in both coaching and business development than virtually any other certification program on the market. That means we've got the flexibility to help virtually any coach who wants it bad enough. You can check out our website at becomearealcoach.com for more details about our personal biographies. But for now, just trust me when I say, if you don't like public speaking, there's no problem. If you hate making cold calls, there's no problem. If you can't even stand the idea of making a website, there's no problem, because we'll show you how to market in a way that's comfortable for you. Now, by this point, you may actually be wondering what happens in the certification program itself. Again, you can visit becomearealcoach.com to read the details, but in a nutshell, our program is largely about the experience of being a coach and not the academic. Each week, you'll meet live with your instructor and your peers and have the experience of practicing that week's coaching or business development lesson with everybody in the group. You'll get detailed feedback from your master coach instructor, and you'll get additional feedback from your peers. And here's an important benefit most people don't think of. You'll get a chance to observe and learn from the other coaches in training. Then, after each event, you'll download a brief set of materials which prepare you for the following week and include an action challenge. So in short, First, you practice with your peers. Then you watch, read, or listen to us describe what you just experienced. And finally, you do it on your own outside of class so you can integrate the learning. Practice, study, then do. It's really that simple in less than an hour a day. There's quite a bit more to know.
So you'll want to visit becomearealcoach.com as soon as you can.
But the most important thing to remember is that in just 12 weeks, you really can become a certified professional coach, confident in your ability, and fully equipped to grow a thriving practice from anywhere or your money back. Head on over to becomearealcoach.com now. Classes fill quickly, so please book your slot today if you're at all interested. Thanks.